The contemporary Filipino society is reliant on water for chores, hygiene, and the like. However, water is difficult to come by in rural areas in the Philippines that have endured events of shortage. In Barangay Danio, Laguna, locals use the Tabo to tolerate the shortage due to the decrease of water levels of their main water source. Heretofore, this study will answer the question, what rural Filipino norm on water conservation is embedded in the use of Tabo? This is Behind the Tabo, an ethnographic study on the rural Filipino norm on water conservation.
The Tabo has long been part of Philippine history as it dates back to prior times, with its first versions fabricated from coconut shells and bamboo. It is presently constructed from plastic and is an indispensable fixture in a Filipino household, commonly used for cleaning bathroom floors, washing hands, and more. According to Tan, the Tabo is more than a dipper as it is a distinctive part of Filipino culture. Filipinos disregard the Tabo along with the norm and do not realize the values embedded in it. They detach from rural methods of water conservation using the Tabo, and the norm loses its influence in the society. This study identifies the significant rural Filipino norm on water conservation embedded in the use of the Tabo. As stated by MacLeod, identifying and studying the norm will provide the study with an idea of how the selected sample co-researchers from Barangay Danio conserve water in the occurrence of shortage.
The human experience of the norm on water conservation will explain how the selected co-researchers of Danio use the Tabo as a means of conserving water, therefore justifying the definitive rural Filipino norm embedded in it. This study will disclose the norm embedded in the use of Tabo of the representative rural Filipino society to recognize a shared underlying set of social standards and values on water conservation. This will be introduced to areas that experience frequent water shortage to provide rural locals an ordinance that requires the use of Tabo, which will be beneficial as its commonality, practicality, and affordability is ideal for conserving water according to MAP.
Qualitative inquiry was used for it allowed a more in-depth discussion of the norm and a thorough understanding of the social phenomena within the rural setting of Danio and other locals with the same adversity. This is an ethnographic form of study since it contextualizes the culture behind the rural Filipino norm on water conservation. This study has selected Barangay Danio in Laguna as its representative sample because it currently endures water shortage. Danio was also a feasible location for the researchers. Selection was reliant on the sampling technique, which was purposive and on a specified sample. The study selected 30 co-researchers for the kwentuhan and 9 immersions were conducted, all of which were observed. The criteria for the co-researchers regards locals from Danio who are 35 years old and above as they have symbolic connection to the past and have knowledge, according to Stiegelbauer. The co-researchers selected have endured water shortage for at least 2 months and have resorted to using the Tabo to conserve water.
A letter of permission was given to Danio's barangay captain, Herbert Formelosa, to conduct the research within the locale. A letter of consent was also given, and consent was iterated to each co-researcher to allow the recording of the responses in audio and visual form. The letter had assured that all recordings will be kept confidential and private.
Data collection was in the form of kwentuhan method. Immersions and observations were done. These forms of inquiry were used in this study to familiarize with sociocultural norms embedded in the use of Tabo in order to understand the norm behind it. Extensive questioning and participation in the life of the residents of Danio were conducted. Other measures were taken such as profiling of the co-researchers, note-taking of statements, and transcript writing.
James Bradley's ethnographic approach was used consisting of 12 steps. This approach focused on the interconnections of gathered data, which gave way to the identification of the rural Filipino norm embedded in the use of the Tabo through domain making and taxonomic analysis. Domain making was used to extract domains and codes from the saturated statements of the co-researchers. They were then classified and became the basis of the formulation of the cover terms, or what we call the clusters. The relationship of the cover terms and the domains were then identified to make a taxonomic analysis, which unveiled the 4 main principles behind the development of the norm.
Here we have the diagram of the collective findings of our study. This is the utilization of Tabo as a rural Filipino norm on water conservation, which defines the norm as a developed standard towards the realization of the consequences of prior wastage. Through this, a common norm is developed. Each ellipses are ordered according to the most apparent principle up until the underlying principle. Locals are able to develop these principles in a progressive manner. The outer surface encompasses the principles, in which the realization of the norm must involve all four principles from most to least apparent. The GAMIT Principle states that Filipinos use the tabo for its versatility. It is used to transfer water and to do chores. The Google Principle states that the tabo is used to control, measure, and draw the exact amount of water to be used for specific tasks and to spend supply in a methodical manner. The GINHAWA Principle states that the norm of using tabo has developed from the motives to minimize the weariness factor when collecting water through pagigib, going lengthy distances to collect water from source back and forth, and to make worth of early morning collected resource. The GAWI Principle states that the use of tabo leads to the development of a value, especially in conserving water, and to accept shortage as a consequence of prior wastage. From water wastage, the GAMIT Principle becomes the basis for the tabo as a tool for household chores. Then it becomes a measurement of water supply, thus the Google Principle. Next is the realization of the GINHAWA Principle, which uses the tabo to minimize the weariness of locals. The continuous use of tabo enables one to develop a value towards conserving water, embodying the GAWI Principle.
Most locals embody more than one principle, if not a blend, in their routines using the tabo. This shows the realization, reflection, and fulfillment which happens in succession towards the development of the norm. The tabo was inherently utilized so as to elucidate the four principles. Observation and kwentuhan was implemented into immersion to ensure that the tabo is used specifically for water. This rural Filipino norm is vindicated through the four principles, namely GAMIT, Google, GINHAWA, and GAWI, that were actualized from first-hand immersion, observation, and kwentuhan by the co-researchers. This study has imparted substantial basis towards the fulfillment of the objective to publicize an ordinance for rural barangays that fall under the same criteria as the representative sample locale.
In this study, the researchers found that there exists a rural Filipino norm on water conservation, which is the strict use of water through the utilization of the tabo. The norm becomes the standard for locals who conform to the four principles, namely the GAMIT, Google, GINHAWA, and GAWI, which are customary in the locale that has undergone a formidable event of water shortage. To conclude, the rural Filipino norm embedded in the use of the tabo is the strict use of water through its use. It significantly is contingent on the development and the fulfillment of the four principles. This leads to the realization of the consequences of the prior wastage that urges the necessity to use the tabo to conserve water.